You ever look at a piece of steel and think it's clean, only to have the welding arc tell you exactly how wrong you are? It's like the metal is keeping secrets, Alex. You strike that arc and suddenly it's spitting like a cornered cat because there's a microscopic speck of oil from 3 weeks ago still clinging to the grain.
Spitting like a cat? That's oddly specific. But I get it. I've seen you spend 40 minutes scrubbing a bracket that takes 40 seconds to weld. It always seemed a bit obsessive, like you were trying to polish a mirror rather than join two bits of structural plate.
It's not vanity, I promise. It's what keeps the roof from falling on your head. Most folks think welding is the act of melting metal together, but the real work, the part that actually determines if that joint is going to hold through a winter storm or a heavy load, happens way before you ever flip the hood down. If you don't respect the surface prep, the metal won't respect the weld.
Well, today we're peeling back the layers on that obsession. We're talking surface preparation and weld quality. And apparently, there's a whole surface preparation scale that I didn't know existed until this morning.
Oh, it's real. And most hobbyists start at level 1, which is basically found this in a damp field and it's more orange than a sunset.
Level 1, rust covered. That sounds like your entire scrap bin, Tiger.
Hey, that scrap bin is a curated collection of future possibilities. But you're right, level 1 is a nightmare. If you try to weld over heavy rust, you're basically inviting porosity to move in and start a family. Rust is oxidized iron. It's got oxygen trapped in it. You hit that with 5,000 degrees of arc, and that oxygen turns into gas bubbles inside your molten puddle. It's like trying to build a brick wall out of sponges.
So, what's the move? Do you just hit it with a wire brush and hope for the best, or is this where the big guns come out?
A wire brush on level 1 rust is like trying to mow a hayfield with a pair of nail scissors. You're just polishing the scales. For the heavy stuff, you need mechanical removal. I'm talking abrasive blasting or a serious grinding wheel, something like a Type 27. It's got that flat face and rigid build that can really hog off the rot until you see bright, shiny silver. If you don't see a reflection, or at least a very clean matte gray, you aren't done.
And once you get past the barn find stage, we hit level 2, minor rust. This is where I usually get lazy. It's just a little surface scale, right? Can't I just burn through that?
That's the siren song of the lazy welder, Alex. I'll just crank the heat and burn it out. But that scale is stubborn. Even a little bit of it can lead to weak fusion. This is where a good knotted wire wheel on an angle grinder earns its keep. It's aggressive enough to flick the scale off, but won't remove as much parent metal as a grinding disc.
Okay, so we've cleared the rust, but then we hit level 3, clean but coated. This one feels like a trap. The metal looks great. Maybe it's even painted a nice red oxide, so it feels protected.
Red oxide is the devil's gift to welders. It looks professional, but it's basically a layer of chemicals designed to stay between the metal and the atmosphere. If you weld over paint, primer, or even the oil they spray on cold-rolled steel to keep it from rusting in the warehouse, you aren't just getting a bad weld. You're cooking up a batch of toxic fumes that'll make your head spin faster than a cheap carnival ride.
I've smelled that burnt paint aroma in the shop. It's not exactly Chanel number 5.
It's worse than the smell. Those coatings break down into carbon and hydrogen. The hydrogen gets into the cooling weld metal and causes hydrogen embrittlement. It's a fancy way of saying your weld might look pretty, but it's as brittle as a dry cracker. You have to use a solvent, something non-chlorinated like acetone. Wipe it down until the rag comes away white. If the rag is gray, the metal is still dirty.
So we're aiming for level 4, clean and dry. That's the gold standard?
Level 4 is where the magic happens. No oil, no rust, no paint, just pure naked steel. That's where you get that perfect bacon sizzling sound and a puddle that flows like warm butter.
Speaking of naked steel, let's talk about the physical shape of the joint. You don't just butt two thick plates together and hope the heat reaches the middle, do you?
Only if you want it to fall apart when a breeze hits it. Anything over a 1/4 inch, you've got to give the weld a place to live. You have to prepare the house before the guests arrive. That means beveling.
I've seen you using those flap discs for that. You seem to favor them over the hard grinding wheels lately.
Flap discs are like the Swiss Army knife of the shop. I use a Type 29, the one with the slight angle to the flaps. It gives you a bit more feel and control so you don't accidentally gouge a divot into the plate. But you have to be careful. If you're doing a V-groove, you want a 30-degree bevel on each side. If you get too aggressive and make the edge as sharp as a kitchen knife, the arc will just melt that thin edge away. We call it blowing the land, and then you've got a hole where a joint should be.
Blowing the land. Sounds like a bad day at the farm.
It's a bad day at the bench, that's for sure. You want a little land, maybe an eighth of an inch of flat vertical surface at the bottom of your bevel. It acts like a heat sink and gives the root pass a foundation to sit on.
Now, I know you have a separate dedicated toolbox for aluminum. Is that just you being a diva, or is there a reason for the VIP treatment?
If I'm a diva, it's only because aluminum is a high maintenance rock star. Here's the deal. Aluminum prep is a different solar system. It forms an oxide layer the second it touches air. That oxide layer melts at 3 times the temperature of the actual aluminum. If you don't scrub it off with a stainless steel brush, one that has never touched carbon steel, you're basically trying to weld through a layer of ceramic.
And the dedicated brush?
If you use a brush that's been cleaning rusty iron, you're just shoving tiny particles of iron into the soft aluminum grain. You'll get pitting and corrosion later that looks like the metal has the measles. And once you clean it, you've got a ticking clock. If you wait more than 24 hours to weld it, that oxide layer has moved back in and set up shop again.
Wow. So it's basically a clean and cook situation. No prepping on Friday for a Monday morning weld session.
Exactly. It's just-in-time manufacturing at the kitchen table level.
You know, I read a report the other day that said there's a massive shortage of skilled welders, like 400,000 by 2024. A lot of places are moving to robots. Do the robots care about surface prep as much as you do?
The robots care more. A human welder can see a bit of dirt and adjust their hand, maybe linger a second to burn through a speck of grease. A robot is a blind soldier. It's going to follow the path it was told. If there's a gap or a dirty spot, it'll just weld right over it and produce a beautiful looking piece of junk. We're seeing more cobots now, collaborative robots where the human does the prep and the robot does the repetitive passes. But that human still has to know the 5P rule.
Let me guess, proper preparation prevents poor performance?
You've been listening. Usually that fourth P is a bit more colorful in a real shop, but we'll keep it family friendly for the listeners.
I appreciate the restraint. So, walk me through a multi-pass weld. If I'm doing a heavy structural joint, I don't just fill the whole V-groove in one go.
Not unless you want the metal to warp into a pretzel. It's like a song. It has verses and a chorus. You start with the root pass. That's the most critical one, right at the bottom of the V. Then you have the hot pass, which digs in and cleans out any slag left behind. Then your filler passes to build up the bulk. And finally, the cap pass, which is the pretty one everyone sees.
And you have to clean between every one of those?
Every single one. If you leave even a tiny bit of slag or silicone from the previous bead and weld over it, you've just encapsulated a flaw. It's like leaving a grape in a loaf of bread. It's always going to be a soft spot. You hit it with a stringer bead wire wheel, those really tight twisted ones, to knock the glass off the top of the weld.
It sounds like welding is 10% fire and 90% scrubbing.
You're finally starting to see the truth. People come into the craft wanting to see the sparks fly, but the masters are the ones who are okay with the quiet, dusty work of making sure those sparks have a clean place to land.
Before we wrap up, you mentioned something about preheating. Why would you add heat before you add the heat?
Think about it like a cold swimming pool. If you jump in, it's a shock to the system. Thick steel is a giant heat sink. If you start welding on a cold slab of 1-inch plate, it sucks the heat out of the arc so fast the weld doesn't have time to wet out or fuse. It just sits on top like a cold caterpillar.
So you warm it up to give it a head start?
Exactly. About 250 degrees is usually the sweet spot for structural stuff. I use these temp sticks. They look like crayons, but they melt at a specific temperature. Once that mark turns liquid, you know you're ready to dance. It prevents the weld from cooling too fast and cracking like an ice cube in hot water.
That looks incredible, Tiger. I guess the 40 minutes of scrubbing was worth the 40 seconds of arc time.
It always is. If you take one thing away from this, it's that the metal has a memory. If you treat it poorly at the start, it'll remind you exactly when it fails. But if you give it a clean foundation, it'll hold up the world for you.
A clean foundation for a strong finish. I like that. Thanks for schooling me today, Tiger.
Anytime. Now go grab a wire brush. That scrap bin isn't going to clean itself.
Don't push your luck.